Kirby. Nintendo's Pink Puffball. Surprised I haven't talked about him yet, as it's one of my favorite franchises. I'll keep the history lesson brief for those in the know already, but the Kirby series are very simple 2D platformers that star Kirby, the titular character. Kirby is the brainchild of Masahiro Sakurai of Smash Bros. Fame. It was a humble start with Kirby's Dream Land on the Game Boy, where Kirby didn't even have his signature copy ability yet. That wouldn't be until Kirby's Adventure where he'd get that iconic power. For what's relevant to this video, the series started a renaissance after the release of Return to Dreamland on the Wii in 2011. Given the series took a bit of a dirt nap on consoles after 64's release, given that Return to Dreamland was in development hell, as it was originally a GameCube game and had 2 other iterations that barely got off the ground. I'd love for a build of that GameCube game to surface, by the way. It looks really interesting. Return to Dreamland was followed by 2 games on the 3DS, Kirby Triple Deluxe, and the game I'll be discussing today, Kirby Planet Robobot. As the title of the video suggests, this game is peak Kirby in my opinion. It takes what worked in the previous games and expands on and puts a new twist on it. Let's start with the plot, and it'll be brief. Robotic invaders mechanize all of Popstar while Kirby is doing... what else? But sleeping. DDD and Meta Knight try to defend Popstar, but of course, they fail or we'd have no plot in this game. Kirby goes to stop these invaders from their scheme. Around halfway into the adventure, Kirby encounters Susie, the secretary of the Haltman Works Company, the ones invading Popstar as mentioned a moment ago. She antagonizes Kirby by using mechanized versions of his friends. She also has a disdain for organic life forms, which really isn't elaborated on much. I'll go more into her later as well as save the finale for when we get there, but that's the gist. I love when plots are simple for the sake of scripting this review. This leads us swimmingly into the graphics and sound. This game looks absolutely incredible for the 3DS. It's a late 3DS release after all, so HAL Laboratory took full advantage of that fact and filled the levels to the brim with little details. They even mechanized a lot of the popular Kirby tropes like the grassland, desert, water levels, and they mixed the old and the new super well. We've got mechanized plains, harbors for the water levels, and a desert with pasta power lines held up by forks and blenders. They certainly shook up the status quo with the level themes in this game. They went as far as to mechanize the classic enemies such as the common fodder having a bit of metal on them, and even Wispy Woods who had a complete makeover, and he's even named Clanky Woods in this game. It comes as a bit of a jump scare when he chases you in the first level, really showing the threat Kirby is dealing with on this adventure. Excellent example of subtle storytelling. There's even some new area themes for this series, such as the train levels, the casinos with giant billiard balls, and the cities where even the Waddle-Dees and their cars follow the traffic lights. Extra praise has to go to the virtual areas near the end of the game. It reminds me a lot of Another Dimension from Return to Dreamland and Digital Circuit and Mad Matrix from Shadow the Hedgehog. The music that plays in these levels being unsettling really adds to the strange vibes of the final areas of this game. On the topic of the music, it's great stuff with tons of remixes of classic Kirby themes with a mechanized twist, with chiptune and even dubstep at one point. I've used a few pieces from this game's soundtrack in my videos, especially the song that plays in the underwater city level. I'll admit some of the pieces get a little grating, like the piece that plays in the train levels has an annoying start, and the Factory Investigation remix sounds like someone slammed a piano at the start, but other than that, it's fantastic as per usual for this series. Take a listen to a few tracks. Now for the gameplay. If you've played any modern Kirby game since Return to Dreamland, you'll be right at home. The game plays nearly identically to Return to Dreamland, Triple Deluxe, and later Star Allies. The background foreground layer element returns from Triple Deluxe and is put to good use for some puzzles. It's a very simple moveset, which is refreshing since the Mega Man games I've talked about are more complex than this. You run and jump with the ability to float, and along the way you'll inhale enemies and take their powers. That's really it beyond like guarding and such when it's not too relevant in the main story despite its usefulness. Kirby isn't a series known for complex mechanics, and that's okay. Before we get to the main defining gimmick of this game that makes it really special, there's code cubes. They're the equivalent to energy spheres and sunstones in the last 2 games. They're obtained by solving puzzles, doing a movement challenge, or some other way of interacting with the environment. This usually happens with an item like the pole that extends to both the foreground and background. There's a really cool one with a Game Boy remote control for a mini Kirby that copies your every move. And there's batteries, which are essentially the keys from the last 2 games. All of this makes the stages feel more like playgrounds to mess around in. The code cubes are required to progress to the world's boss, as you'll need a certain amount, much like Triple Deluxe with its sunstones. As long as you're somewhat diligent in exploring, you'll never need to backtrack, given a few are on the beaten path or require a slight bit of exploration. I'll praise the fact that this game doesn't pull the bring an ability from another stage thing. That got real annoying in games like Kirby 64. Getting all the code cubes in the world also gives you an extra stage, so there's extra incentive for finding them beyond completion. The main gimmick of this game is the Robobot armor. I will refer to this as the armor for the rest of the review, so yeah. The armor will make or break the game, as it takes up around half the runtime, as it takes up a significantly larger portion than Hypernova or the super abilities did, as those were limited to specific sections. Thankfully, they nailed it here. Unlike a lot of other games where there's alternate styles of play, where you'll be having fun blasting through the stages, then you're hit with the beat 'em up section that drags the pace down or something like that. I still love Sonic Unleashed, warts and all, by the way. Put the pitchforks down. Think of the armor like the ride armors from the Mega Man X games, where you ride around in a mech and cause havoc. In the X games, it was nothing more than a temporary diversion to spice up the level design with varying types per X game. There were ones that could hover for a little bit, or had a charge attack, or such things like that. X8 did have a whole level dedicated to the ride armor, but it's much more of a mechanic here. In this game's case, I wouldn't have it any other way. This works so well since the armor is an extension of Kirby's capabilities, as it can use the majority of Kirby's abilities, and they keep the variety up the whole game. You'll never go, ugh, another robot section, like I sometimes do in Return to Dreamland or Triple Deluxe with their respective gimmicks. In fact, the armor isn't restrained to certain sections anymore as the previous 2 gimmicks were. It's a constant presence and even has dedicated stages for it. Each armor ability can be boiled down to a destroy stuff button, yeah, but the difference that makes it work is it's often used for puzzle solving, like using stone to move giant forklifts around, using the ice ability to freeze water, or using spark to power up plugs to do time challenges for code cubes. Plus, feeling overpowered is such a thrill. The highlights for me have to be the wheel and jet stages, which transform the entire level into a high-speed thrill ride for the former, with fun movement challenges for the cubes, and the latter are the typical Kirby shoot-'em-up stages, which even has a surprise boss with Kabula at one point. They're used sparingly enough to where they're a treat when they show up. The super abilities in Hypernova of the last 2 games were, while fun, they did tend to drag on later in the game as their sections were quite long and didn't have the mechanical depth that feel fresh the entire game in my opinion. At least the former had those fun monochrome dimension stages. There's also stickers that you can use to decorate the Robobot armor, but they're nothing more than a keychain and rare keychain equivalent from the last game. The rare stickers are usually more hidden than the code cubes. It's a novelty that doesn't detract from anything. Planet Robobot also introduces a few new abilities to the series, and it brings back a few as well. New to this game are Doctor, ESP, and Poison. Doctor is more of a novelty, much like Circus from the last game, where it's usable but it's not one of my favorites. The other 2 are winners in my opinion though. ESP is one of the best abilities as it does decent damage and even has a counter that does decent damage if you time a guard well, much like super guarding a Paper Mario or a typical fighting game counter. Plus Kirby dons a hat much like the inspiration, so that's pretty neat. Poison is similar to water from Return to Dreamland, but it has attacks that leave residue that does damage and it's just fun to use. Neat that it ties into the corruption and mechanization of Popstar aspect of the plot, and the fact this all contrasts with the very natural focus of Triple Deluxe given the plot of that game. Mirror and Jet from Superstar return, which is neat since they're some of the lesser used abilities, so it's good to see them back. Especially in Jet's case since it gives us the earlier mentioned Robobot levels. My favorite returning ability, and honestly my favorite ability in the franchise, is Smash Bros. It only appeared on Amazing Mirror in the 20th Anniversary Collections Challenge stages. I wish they'd use it more. It does exactly what you think it does. It gives Kirby Smash moveset and it's absolutely broken here. His up B gives full invincibility frames throughout. He has Hammer and Stone, which is nice, and his neutral air has little cooldown and is very spammable. Wish he was this good in Smash. Well, he is in 64 anyway. Unfortunately, it's only relegated to certain hidden rooms and another mechanic.
Amiibo!
Real quick aside, but for the people who somehow don't know what amiibo are those little figures released when Smash Wii U was new, made to capitalize on the Toys to Life craze when Skylanders was big. It doesn't usually amount to much in a Robobot. They don't do much beyond giving Kirby a copy ability matching the character scanned. The Kirby series amiibo that released alongside this game gave alternate costumes of Sword, Hammer, and Parasol. Kirby's gives UFO, which is relegated to 100% completion otherwise. Kirby's Smash amiibo gives Smash Bros, which is the only other way to use it. It's the only way to use UFO and Smash Bros in the side modes, actually. The amiibo mechanic is niche and barely has any practical use beyond if you want a specific ability, but it's sure handy for the true arena, which I'll touch on later. Like in Triple Deluxe, the food items that Bandana D gives are stored on the bottom screen for later. It's a more stripped-back version of a similar mechanic in Squeak Squad, and it's the only thing the bottom screen really does beyond showing most of the HUD. These food items are usually given before mini-bosses. It's a minor thing, but useful all the same. The touchscreen doesn't do much else besides that. Almost all the gameplay uses the top screen. Along the journey, there's bosses. Most of them are mechanized versions of familiar Kirby bosses, such as Clanky Woods as mentioned earlier, or Mecha Knight and the DDD clones. I have to highlight the latter as it was super fun taking out the Two-Face fight. The final world, the Access Arc, you start in Haltman's company halls and slowly transition to the more abstract digital areas that really unsettle you as you make it closer to his HQ. He must have been the Halcondra or something, since his security robots are remade metal generals. This crescendos into the final stage, where they just let you be this unstoppable force with the armor. I love when Kirby games let you do that. It's so cathartic ripping through mini-bosses and such. I'll admit the later worlds do drag on a bit as the levels are quite long and more numerous in level count, but it's a minor thing that doesn't really matter much in the grand scheme of things. Once you finally make it to Haltman's HQ, Susie's 6 Mecha Knight plus on Kirby. He unsurprisingly beats it with little issue. Then, Haltman pushes her aside and introduces himself as the president of the company. Yes, we're basically fighting a greedy company CEO that wants to eliminate all organic life because reasons. Haltman's boss fight is strange for this series, and that's saying a lot given Kirby fights eldritch horrors every game. He blocks the screen with money like the annoying blooper item in Mario Kart, and most curiously of all, he throws golden statues of Susie as missiles. He even shares a similar attack pattern and mech as her. Of course, Kirby wins, and out of desperation, Haltman activates his computer, Star Dream.
Oh yeah? I can already feel its power!
Out of nowhere though, when Haltman puts the helmet to control the computer on, Susie takes the helmet away, explaining that it was her intention to take Star Dream all along and sell it for high profit. Star Dream then zaps her away and proceeds to take direct control of Haltman's body, erasing his identity in the process. Star Dream declares that it will bring an end to the universe and flies off into space. Susie says that none of this was supposed to happen and gives Kirby a Robobot armor to stop the computer. The Halberd then flies in as Meta Knight will help by flying the Halberd to stop it. Kirby instead jumps out the window and absorbs the entire Halberd, transforming the Robobot armor into the Halberd. This is awesome! The Kirby Halberd flies off to fight Star Dream as Susie wishes them well. I want to talk about Susie for a second. She's barely even a character. Why do people like her as a character so much beyond being adorable? She spends the whole game antagonizing Kirby and now she's sad she can't steal Star Dream? Now we're supposed to feel bad for her? Yeah, I know the lore, but I'll get more into that later. The final fight is a behind-the-back Star Fox-esque shooter, where you dodge projectiles and shoot. I'd complain that it's nothing like the core gameplay since the fight comes when the player hasn't prepared for it, but this works for two reasons. 1. The Robobot armor is just as integral as the main Kirby gameplay. Kinda wish the Robobot got more boss fights besides the giant mech you fight twice at the beginning and near end of the adventure. The second reason is Kirby is no stranger to shoot 'em up gameplay. It's been a staple since the very first Kirby game after all. The jet stages are really the same type of gameplay with a different perspective, so even if the sudden shift in gameplay is jarring, they at least prepare you in some way for it. I think this works despite the relative lack of an introduction to the mechanic for those two reasons. Unlike something like, say, the Sonic Frontiers final boss, where it doesn't give the player time beyond a few short missions to learn the gameplay shift. Also, a good final boss should test the skills the player learned throughout the game. Frontiers straight up took the bullet hell gameplay of Ikaruga with light, dark switching mechanics. It's odd since the other Titan fights in that game are an extension of the regular combat you do in the open world. You're just supersonic instead, so those work on our great capstones to each island. Back to Star Dream. It's a pretty long fight with 3 phases, so strap in. I barely survived this fight as I had 1 HP, which kept me tense throughout the final parts of the fight. That's something Return to Dreamland actually introduced, where a fatal blow leaves you with 1 HP, which I think is a great mechanic for tense moments, much like Second Chance in Kingdom Hearts or Undershirt from Battle Network and Star Force. More games need this, to be honest. I'd love to see it in Mega Man X as an armor part or something. Great visuals for the final fight as it really shows the vastness of space. As the fight progresses, Stardream fuses with the Access Arc and the pieces of it break off, revealing a galactic nova from Superstar? This game loves its fan service moments, huh? Thankfully, while there is a lot of them, it isn't to the detriment of the gameplay, as it's mostly just remixes and some boss fights which are neat callbacks. This game is more than enough new to justify having some recurring bosses. The more fan servicey stuff is in the extra modes anyway, with stuff like Galactonite and Dark Matter. The psychedelic visuals in the third phase paired with all the weird objects especially show the weirdness of these phases. The objects it uses are actually the same ones attached to the original Nova in Superstar. Once its health is depleted, it uses one last desperation laser to try to stop Kirby. I'm just gonna let the moment play out. Yes, that's why I put Yoka from Gurren Lagann in the thumbnail. Plus, the mech design of the Robobot armor is similar to Gurren Lagann, given the face motif in both mech designs. I'm convinced someone at HAL Laboratory really liked the anime. I need to watch it eventually. The day is saved, and the Robobot armor tosses Kirby back to a now-freed Popstar while shedding tears. Kirby wakes up right where the story started, as he, Dedede, and Meta Knight are relieved to see the land restored. Susie flies back since her planet needs her, I guess, and with that, the game ends. This game is fantastic, but before I give my closing thoughts, I'll quickly go through the extra content since there's not much to discuss, but is noteworthy enough for a mention. You've got Meta Nightmare, which is just playing a truncated version of the story as Meta Knight, with his abilities from Superstar Ultra. This mode features harder version of the bosses as well, much like the extra mode of Return to Dreamland and Dedede Tour in Triple Deluxe. Of course, there's a fight with Galactonite, which is always a treat. Loved it in Superstar Ultra and Return to Dreamland, and I love it here too. There's two sub-games as well, Kirby 3D Rumble and Team Kirby Clash, which are neat distractions. For the former, it's neat in retrospect having a look at a 3D Kirby game attempt before Forgotten Land, and the latter is a basis for a Kirby RPG, and I'd be down with a full Kirby RPG someday. They both got expanded eShop games much like Triple Deluxe's sub-games, not much to say. The last thing I want to touch on before I end this review is the arena. It's the typical boss rush fare that every Kirby game has. There's one change in this game's iteration of it that I don't really care for. In previous and future titles in the Kirby series, they give you all the healing items up front, and you have to ration them, which was a risk versus reward mechanic that meant skilled players had more healing for harder fights. In this game, however, you get a cherry per fight, which doesn't sound that bad, but you can only hold one at a time, so if you need healing, you pretty much have to use it that fight unless you waste it. So that means, if you do well, you can't stockpile them. At least it's only 12 bosses in this game. The arena isn't the issue, it's the true arena. This might be one of the most grueling and challenging one in the franchise. There's very little room for error, and that's an issue since they had most of the lore here. Earlier, when I called attention to the Suzy missiles in Hauptmann's fight, they're relevant to his backstory since long ago, Hauptmann lost his daughter in an accident and presuming she was dead, used Stardream to wish for her back. That didn't work, of course, since his daughter is alive, she's Suzy, which by the way is only confirmed in pause menu text. Despite that, it's pretty obvious though. Anyway, he didn't realize that since Stardream messed with his memories to the point where he didn't know that was his daughter. Pretty dark stuff for a Kirby game. I still don't feel bad for him, given that he almost destroyed the world and he's a greedy business CEO that doesn't care about anything besides his bottom line. The only issue is that the game itself doesn't tell you this in the story itself. I get they want to keep the plot simple, and at face value the plot is a simple Kirby versus the invaders, but I don't think it would have hurt anything by including this in an actual cutscene. I'll say at least it is in-game, which is good since other series I really like leave this kind of stuff in external media. Looking at you, Mega Man. The lore around Suzy and Hauptmann is in pause screen flavor text blurbs in Meta Nightmare and the true arena. You know, the super hard boss rush 99% of players won't ever beat without grinding or using amiibo. The amiibo, which gives you healing items, is very useful for staying alive for the grueling fight with Stardream Solo S, which has an extra fourth phase where, hauntingly, Hauptmann's voice cries out whenever you damage it, since at this point he's completely gone. It's kinda sad, honestly. Here's the thing, I find Kirby lore really interesting to read on a wiki, or listen about in a video. But it's presented in-game horribly in my opinion. I'll give it that it's at least unobtrusive being on the pause screen, but I only really pause if I have to do something or check ability moves. I'd much rather have the figurine descriptions like in Forgotten Land, where it's more so just bonus text that comes with a cute gachapon toy. The way they do storytelling isn't bad, I just really do not like the over-reliance on pause screen text to tell the story. Kirby, why do you put lore in the pause screen? That's not an excuse, Kirby. It should be in the game cutscenes, since it should be in-game. Get out of here. Anyway, the final phase of the boss also has a surprise insta-kill attack after you beat it. At least this one is telegraphed well, unlike a certain other boss. Looking at you, Lumine. And with all of that, that's Kirby Planet Robobot. I love this game despite a few minor things such as the pacing dragging late game and my gripes with the story. It's my favorite Kirby game and only Return to Dreamland comes close for me. The level themes and designs are some of the most creative in the series. The robot armor spices up the gameplay and gives the most refined version of the Kirby formula yet. It's hard to mess up the formula since it's so simple to be fair, but they put just enough to make it work and stand out. Great music and visuals as per usual, and it's just a cozy ride if you're looking for a simple game. I'd love this game to get ported like Return to Dreamland did. If you haven't played this or haven't tried Kirby, consider playing this if you can find a way to. Anyways, I'll see you all in the next review.